Hello and welcome to the BA Sports Podcast. We are live on Twitter or X, live on YouTube, live on TikTok, and live on Instagram. Tanner, how's it going? Ready to preview these wide receivers?
Absolutely fired up. Upset I couldn't be here for the running backs, but nonetheless excited to get into these wide receivers. It's gonna help you win your PPR leagues, right?
Heck yeah. Let's get right into it. We're going to go through rankings and tiers first off, then sleepers, breakouts, busts, and draft strategies surrounding the wide receivers so you know what to do when you're picking in your draft slot. So, Tanner, let's get it started off with your tiers. Here we go.
Starting off in tier 1, we've got three very big yet household names. It's gonna be Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, and JSN. Look, if you wanted one of these elite wideouts, you better have a top 5 overall pick when Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs will be the top overall picks in most drafts. I could see all three of these wideouts coming off the board with picks 3 through 5. Clearly, Chase, Nacua, and JSN are top of the top. Nonetheless, right behind them, we have ARSBCD Lamb and JJ Justin Jefferson. All three of these wideouts can be included in the top tier, especially St. Brown, who has finished third in fantasy points at the position in 3 straight seasons. Lamb and Jefferson did lose a bit of their luster after disappointing, well, in Justin Jefferson's case, very disappointing seasons. However, no one would be shocked if one or both of them move back into the top 5 in 2026. Tier 3, we have Drake London, Nico Collins, Chris Olave, AJ Brown, George Pickens, Malik Neighbors, Rashee Rice, and Tet McMillan. Listen, in this tier, it includes players who have either been in the top 5 in fantasy points in the past or have that level of potential in 2026, led by London and Nico Collins. These 6 receivers will all come off the board in the second and third rounds. Neighbors might be the biggest risk in the tier, but he has shown the on-field potential to become a fantasy superstar as long as his knee is healthy. Tier 4, we've got guys like Zay Flowers, Devontae Smith, newly acquired weapon Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, Emeka Egbuka, and T. Higgins. It is in this tier where we start to see some of the top breakout candidates at the wideout position. That includes Egbuka, one of my favorite targets, and Devontae Smith. The remaining wide receivers all have low wide receiver 1 upside or are considered high-end number 2 options, including Waddle and Higgins. Tier 5, we've got Luther Burden, Ladd McConkey, Scary Terry, Christian Watson, Devontae Adams, Parker Washington, DJ Moore, newly acquired rookie Carnell Tate, Jamison Williams, and Rome Odunze. There's plenty of potential in Tier 5, which includes McConkey, Tate, Washington, and Watson among the most intriguing players. It also has several older veterans in Devontae Adams, Scary Terry, and DJ Moore, all of whom could become or remain, in Devontae Adams' case, solid number 2 wideouts in fantasy leagues. Tate, the top rookie wideout, brings some sleeper or breakout appeal as a top option in what will be a new-look Titans pass attack. Waddle, now in Denver, has very strong flex starter appeal. Tier 6, Marvin Harrison Jr., Mike Evans, BTJ, DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin, Dezon Stribling, and Alec Pierce. A mix of veterans and sleepers, this tier features several wide receivers who could make a good fantasy team a title contender if things fall into place. Pierce has some question marks coming off ankle surgery, but he landed a massive offseason contract and should be the top wideout in Indy when healthy. This could also be a make-or-break fantasy year for Maserati Marv, who has yet to reach his fantasy potential but could be a decent bargain. Stribling. Stribling has moved up during the summer and is now a potential wide receiver 4 with upside in fantasy drafts. Tier 7, we have newly acquired Washington Commander Stephon Diggs, the injured, out for 2 months Jordan Tyson, rookie Mekhi Lemon, Michael Wilson, Jordan Addison, Wandale Robinson, Cortland Sutton, Josh Downs, and Quentin Johnston. Note that Digg has moved up since signing with the Commanders, and Lemon has fallen as he continues to miss time due to injuries. Tyson has also fallen several spots after his hamstring injury again, and he will be out until mid-October. Wilson was a top 10 wideout last season, but regression is very likely coming. Downs has some bargain appeal in Indy. Addison could be a bargain too if things play out well with the Vikings quarterback situation under Kyler Murray. And Tier 8, rounding things out, we have KC Concepcion, Jaden Reed, Jacoby Myers, Matthew Golden, Michael Pittman Jr., and Jalen Coker. Another tier, another long list of potential draft bargains that includes Stribling, who could be a year one fantasy asset with the 49ers. Concepcion, who could lead all Browns wideouts in targets as a rookie, and sleepers such as Golden and Coker. Reed also has some fantasy as a late round value in drafts. This is one of my favorite tiers among wideouts, simply because I can see multiple members come up huge for fantasy fans this season. Brady, let's pass things over to you and hear your wide receiver rankings going into 2026.
Let's do it. Starting off, ranked number 1 overall, Jamar Chase. Puka Nacua, number 2. No surprise there. Number 3, quite a shocker. I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God, at 3rd. That rounds out my Tier 1 wide receivers. Tier 2, JSN, Emerald City. This is him. Number 5, the Cowboys. Number 1 wide receiver, C.D. Lamb. Pretty much consensus so far. Justin Jefferson, number 6 for my Tier 2. That is JSN, C.D. Lamb, and Justin Jefferson. Now let's get into Tier 3 where things get real interesting. Drake London starts off Tier 3 at the 7th overall wide receiver for me. Now things are going to get a little weird if Michael Penix. He's going to have Tua Tagovailoa throwing to him. Can he stay healthy? A.J. Brown, number 8. Should he be number 7? With concerns about Drake London and his quarterback? Possibly. A.J. Brown's got a great new quarterback in Drake May. Rounding out 9, Nico Collins. Can he stay healthy? I don't know. Tier 3 rounds out with number 10, Rashee Rice. Well, he's going to be there to start the season, but how long will he stay on the field? Hopefully he doesn't get in trouble anymore. I'm 4 ranks higher than consensus on Rashee Rice. Tier 4 starts out with none other than George Pickens. Thank you, Pittsburgh Steelers, for sending him over to our Dallas Cowboys. Number 11, number 12, Malik Neighbors. Hopefully he's healthy to start the year. I think he's a good pick in round 2, end of round 2, early round 3. 13th overall, Devontae Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles, their new wide receiver 1. 14th, Emeka Egbuka. Super high on Egbuka right now. I'm 7 higher than consensus. That is rounding out Tier 4. Let's get into Tier 5. Another Cincinnati Bengal, T. Higgins. 5 higher than consensus. And then Chris Olave, who I seem to be lower than consensus on. Right now it's saying I'm 6 lower on consensus, but I think he's a great pick. Early round 3. I'm fine with taking him at the end of round 2 after Jordan Tyson's injury. Zay Flowers, one of my breakouts this year. I have him wide receiver 17, and then Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 18, Tier 5. Those 2 guys are great value in rounds 3 and round 4. I got Ladd McConkey in round 5. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. Absolutely fleeced. Tier 6, Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. I don't know what his situation is going to look like, but hopefully Geno Smith can get him the ball and he can stay healthy. Number 20, wide receiver, is Jalen Waddle of the Denver Broncos. DJ Moore at wide receiver 21. I really love him. Higher than consensus on him. 4 higher. 22nd, Luther Burden of the Chicago Bears. He looks like he's getting healthy. May play in the preseason. Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders is 23, and that rounds out my Tier 6. Tier 7, Tedero McMillan. I'm way lower than consensus on him, and I'll get into it in this episode. Devontae Adams, wide receiver 25. Romo Dunze, wide receiver 26. One of my breakouts this year, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 27. Wide receiver 28, Mike Evans. Can he stay healthy? Let's just ask that electrical substation in San Francisco. Tier 7, that rounds it out. Tier 8, let's go. Jameson Williams, Parker Washington, Christian Watson, Josh Downs, Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, Brian Thomas Jr., and Carnell Tate. That rounds out my Tier 8 and my top 36 wide receivers to win you your league. let's get into some sleepers, breakouts, and busts. Here we go, Tanner. Who do you have at the sleeper position for wide receiver?
Yeah, starting it off, gonna go with the fully recovered, return to practice, expected for the season opener. It's gonna be Mekhi Lemon, first round pick out of USC. I think Lemon has a chance to make an immediate fantasy impact in Philly. In fact, he'll be the second wideout picked from the Eagles roster behind number 1 Devontae Smith. While the team did add Hollywood Brown and Dontavian Wicks, Lemon has a much higher ceiling than either of those players, even in a low volume pass attack. I'm not suggesting that he'll be an elite wideout in year one, but I can see Lemon being a flex worthy player in fantasy leagues. Next, another injured guy who won't be coming back. It's going to be Jordan Tyson. Kind of just wanted to get the injury guys out of the way. I had scratched off some others, but still wanted to mention these two. Again, Lemon's good to go. Tyson, he'll be out until mid-October, I believe. He's going to be out for 2
Yeah.
months. But when he comes back, he landed in a great spot. He'll be the projected starter opposite of Chris Olave in the Saints passing game. He's a dynamic wideout with big time upside. Arizona State product. I think he should play an immediate role for Coach Kellen Moore. When you consider New Orleans was in the top 5 in neutral pass rate last season per fantasy points, that makes Tyson even more of a prominent sleeper. Sure, injuries have been a concern in the past, and they definitely are right now. But it's not hard to like Tyson as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 who could push for flex appeal. Next, we have Chris Godwin of the Bucks. Brady, you know it, and I know it. Godwin can't be labeled as a true sleeper. However, this list isn't just sleepers. It includes players who could far outplay their average draft position.
Mm-hmm.
When you consider Mike Evans is now out of the mix in Tampa, he's with the Niners, yet Godwin is still the wide receiver 40 based on
Yep.
ADP data. So it's obvious that he becomes a potential draft bargain. While Egmika Egbuka is the wideout to target in Tampa Bay, Godwin looks like a strong value choice.
Yep.
Next, we're moving on to Parker Washington in Jacksonville. Um, Washington was an absolute league winner for fantasy managers down the stretch last season, scoring 65.2 points in his final 3 games. He clearly became one of Trevor Lawrence's favorite targets in the offense, and his emergence will allow the Jaguars to use Travis Hunter and more often as a cornerback, which they could use. I mean, regardless though, Parker Washington's fantasy stock's definitely on the rise, and a fantasy-friendly offense led by Liam Cohen. And just to note, Washington had 19 catches for 347 yards in his last 3 games last season. Next up, we've got Xavier Worthy, coming off a disappointing 2025 campaign. But it seems like a nagging shoulder injury was at least partially to blame. Now healthy, we know he's fast as hell. He's locked into the number 2 wideout role in Kansas City. And when you factor in Rashee Rice's off-field issues and the fact that he's coming off of knee surgery, Worthy could see an even more expanded role than projected. He's currently not even being picked as a top 50 wideout based on ADP. Up next, Brady, a guy I know you're definitely going to cover, KC Concepcion.
You know
All
it.
right. Look, first round pick of the Browns could come in and make an immediate impact. The team's projected top slot receiver, and he has drawn some comparisons to Zay Flowers, who new Cleveland head coach Todd Monken coached while he was in Baltimore. It would be no surprise if Concepcion led all Browns wide receivers in targets, making him an intriguing late round pick in redraft leagues. He's being picked outside of the top 50 wideouts based on ADP data. Next, we have Matthew Golden. Golden didn't make much of an impact as a rookie. He finished outside the top 80 wide receivers based on fantasy points, I believe. But the good news is he'll play a far more prominent role in the Packers' pass attack this season. The team lost Romeo Doubs as a free agent and traded Dontavian Wicks to the Eagles, leaving Matthew Golden to be a projected starter alongside Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. The former first round pick is also lightning fast and capable of making big plays, so he should become a prominent option for Jordan Love in year 2. I would target him as a number 4 fantasy wideout who could become a viable flex starter. Next, we have Josh Downs. Worth noting, he has a minor calf injury at the moment. They're, at least the team's calling it minor. I mean, teams love to do that, but that's what we're rolling with on this podcast. The team's word. The trade that sent Michael Pittman Jr. to the Steelers opened the door not only for Alec Pierce, but also for Josh Downs to have a career season. A targeted slot man who has shown flashes of potential in the past. Downs averaged a respectable 13.1 points per game in his second NFL season before posting just 8.5 points per game a year ago. Obviously, that plays into where he's being drafted. Now, I can see him inching back towards his 2024 totals this season, making him what would be a nice late round pick. And then very last on the sleeper list, we have Malik Washington of the Dolphins. I mean, somebody's got to catch passes in Miami, right?
I
I
guess.
mean, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are gone. Jalen Waddle are gone, which leaves Washington as the most targeted Dolphins wideout left on the roster from a season ago. He's a versatile player. He can play on the inside. He can play on the perimeter. There's a chance that he'll lead Miami's receivers in targets next season or this season. So if you're in a deeper league and you want to take a late round chance on a wideout, I think Malik Washington should be on your radar. And that caps off my list of sleepers. Brady, who do you have amongst your favorite wide receiver sleepers this season?
Yeah, I'm going to lead it off with a guy you talked about, but we're in agreement on Chris Godwin. Zach Robinson said he's going to continue to man the slot, and when he mans the slot, he averages 2.1 yards per route run compared to 1.49 elsewhere. He has 33% target share per route run, as opposed to 21% elsewhere. His yards per catch is 12.1 as opposed to 9.9 elsewhere in the slot. And then in the slot, he's got 5 touchdowns and only 2 elsewhere. So whenever he's in the slot, he's the go-to guy for Baker Mayfield. I imagine they're going to rotate him and Igbuka around, but Godwin's going to be that slot guy, and he's being drafted near wide receiver 40, which, I mean, is his floor. He was wide receiver 38 in 2023, but he has 5 top 20 fantasy finishes and only 2 below wide receiver 36. Both of those times not healthy. So it's just a guy that I think is due for a bounce back year. I think the Bucks offense is due for a bounce back year. I'm investing in Godwin. I'm investing in Igbuka. I wouldn't mind a sprinkle Bucky, but only if he falls a little bit. I like Baker going late as a quarterback. But yeah, Chris Godwin is sleeper wide receiver. Can't wait to see what he's got in store for the 2026 season. Another old veteran guy that was on your New England Patriots last year, Tanner, Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 38 in drafts. I think he can be a viable wide receiver 3 option. I've got him inside my top 36. So he can definitely provide that value as a wide receiver 3 flex option for your fantasy team. And now where I think Diggs is going to excel is, he needs to land in a spot where they need to they use a wide receiver. And I mean, they've got Terry McLaurin, they got Chigo Conquo in the offseason, but they don't really have that set wide receiver too. Well, they went out and got Stephon Diggs. He had a strong 2025 season. I think that Jane Daniels has got to get him involved, especially in the short passing game. So I expect another season further out from his ACL surgery. I think he's a good wide receiver 3 for you to target in drafts, but you don't have to target him as high as other wide receiver 3s are going. He's going super late in drafts. So take a flyer on him, late round pick, and really just hope he can produce that wide receiver 3 value for you. It's a low risk, high reward scenario for Stephon Diggs. Another guy you talked about, Casey Concepcion, wide receiver 47 in drafts, and the Browns are going to use him all over the field. I truly think he's the Browns' number 1 wide receiver this season. And where he's priced at in drafts, the risk of bad quarterback play comes into mind. Deshaun Watson's the quarterback. Shador Sanders may man that job by the end of the year. But I think for either one of them. It's not like they're going to be throwing to him downfield. Sure, there are going to be some deep shots, but if we saw anything this preseason, they love the pre-snap motion, put him in motion, throw it to him on an end around, short, quick game passes. Let Casey Concepcion work his speed in space. I think that's exactly what the Cleveland Browns are going to do, and get the ball into the most dangerous weapon they have, in my opinion. He can return kicks as well. I imagine he's going to be returning kicks and punts for them. So Concepcion had 2023 17th in missed tackles forced among FBS wide receivers in 2023. So that's good news for this Cleveland Browns offense. Hopefully they can get it to him and let it pay off. So these are guys that you can take late round flyers on. Another guy, Josh Downs, his draft stock's probably dropping, but I think he's still one of my favorite wide receivers to target, even though he's not fully healthy. They added Keenan Allen, but the departure of Michael Pittman Jr., uh, there's like over 100 vacated targets. Keenan Allen's not going to take all of them. I think they got to get Josh Downs more involved because he ranked among the top 20 wide receivers in separation score, according to PFF, highlighting his ability to consistently create space. The Colts showed confidence in Downs by moving on from Pittman, and I think they're going to utilize him. Pierce just got off the PUP list recently, so that's something to watch. But I still think it doesn't affect Josh Downs. I think you can get him later, and hopefully, I think right now he's ADP wide receiver 39, so you can get him late. Definitely take a flyer on him. And a guy that you can take a really late flyer on that I think is highly rewarding late in drafts is Trey Tucker. Not a great offense in the Las Vegas Raiders last year, but Clint Kubiak comes in, and I think he's a low risk, high reward late round pick, like most of these guys. So, especially considering he played at least 88% of the offensive snaps in every game last year, which tells me they're not going to take him off the field in one wide receiver set. So, take a late flyer on Trey Tucker. I don't love Jalen Naylor, but that's another guy you can take a late flyer on in this Las Vegas Raiders offense. That's going to round it out for my sleepers. Guys you can get late, guys that will provide great value. And Tanner, you ready to get into our breakouts? What everyone really wants to hear?
Yes, sir. Let's get right into it. Going to start off with probably my favorite breakout candidate at the wide receiver position. That's going to be Mika Egbuka. He looked like he was going to break out as a rookie, scoring 20 plus fantasy points in 3 of his first 5 games. The wheels did fall off after that, though, as he scored double digits just twice the rest of the season. That was partially due to the return of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan, not to mention a midseason hamstring injury. With Evans signing with the Niners, I love Egbuka, and I think he could easily become the top option in Tampa Bay's passing attack. I mean, he will be. This guy, I don't want to spoil anything for the bold predictions episode, but this guy has the upside of wide receiver 1 finish this season. Next, we're going to go to a controversial guy on this episode. That's going to be Tet McMillan of the Panthers. McMillan, he had a nice rookie season. He posted over 1,000 yards with 7 touchdowns and 211.4 fantasy points. But he did lack consistency, though. That's definitely worth noting. He scored fewer than 12 points in all but 6 of his 17 contests. Still, I expect the big alpha wideout to take the next step to fantasy stardom now that he has 1 season of NFL experience under his belt. McMillan, who finished 16th in points among wide receivers, could make a push into the top 10 in his second NFL campaign. Next, we have Devontae Smith of the Eagles. He projects to be the Eagles' number 1 wide receiver now that A.J. Brown is with New England, which means he could be on the cusp of his best NFL season. He's never averaged more than 15.3 points per game in a single season, and his 11.9 points per game average a year ago is his lowest output since 2021. While the Eagles did add Mekhi Lemon, Dontavian Wicks, and Hollywood Brown, that average is almost guaranteed to improve. In fact, Devontae Smith is a good bet to reemerge into a week in and week out fantasy starter as the Eagles' alpha. Next, we have Rashee Rice, but that comes with an asterisk next to Rice's name. He spent part of his offseason in jail. He needed surgery to clean up some stiffness in his knee, which he was rehabbing in jail in the month of May. So he comes with obvious concerns. However, there is plenty of time for Rice to get back to 100% in time for training camp and the start of the regular season. Like, I don't want to count that out. But he's also yet to truly break out, as he's missed a combined 22 games over the past 2 years due to injuries and a suspension. Again, there's a lot of risk, but being the top option in the Chiefs' passing attack for Patrick Mahomes makes him hard to overlook. Next, we have Lad McConkey. McConkey was a fine sleeper during his rookie season, but the 2025 edition of Keenan Allen caused his fantasy point total to drop 60 fantasy points as an NFL sophomore. The good news is that Keenan is no longer on the roster, so he should once again become the top target for Justin Herbert. With new offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel now calling the shots, McConkey should rebound and become a reliable fantasy starter again. Next, we got Luther Burden. Look, folks, if head coach Ben Johnson's been praising him all offseason, said he was buying Luther Burden's stock, and if head coach Ben Johnson's buying his stock, you should too.
I'm buying it.
Burden will be one of the most popular breakout players in fantasy football this season. He comes open eyes late in his rookie year, scoring 11 plus points in 3 of his final 4 games, including a 27.8 point performance against the 49ers in week 17. The Bears moved on from DJ Moore after trading him to Buffalo, so there will be plenty of targets for Burden to absorb. Also, Coach Ben Johnson again called him electric, and I can't understate this, told the media he was buying Burden's stock during OTAs. Luther has huge upside in his second season and is clearly a player to target. Couple more guys to this list. I'm getting to the end. Carnell Tate of the Titans. The third pick in the 2026 NFL draft, or third. I think he was the third. Tate could be the next in line of Ohio State wide receivers who make a quick fantasy impact. He'll be the clear-cut number 1 option in the passing game for Cam Ward, who should develop into a far more productive quarterback under new coordinator Brian Daboll in his second season. While it might take a year for Tate to fully bust out in the stat sheets, he certainly has wide receiver 2 upside based on his projected target share. Christian Watson of the Packers. Will this finally be the season that Christian Watson breaks out? He certainly put up some nice stat lines down the stretch in 2025.
He posted healthy.
He posted 18 plus fantasy points 4 times in his final 7 games. Again, the Packers let Romeo Doubs walk as a free agent, traded Dontavian Wicks, so the wideout room is far less crowded. Like you said, Brady, if Watson can't avoid injuries, which is a big if, it's been a big problem in the past. There's no reason he couldn't become a solid number 2 fantasy wide receiver this season. 2 more guys. Rome Odunze of the Bears. I know we talked about Luther Burden. I don't know if you remember on this podcast last season, but my breakout prediction for Rome Odunze looked great after the first 4 weeks, as he posted the 3rd most points among wide receivers. Unfortunately, the wheels kind of fell off after that. Foot injury limited his time on the field and kept him out of fantasy lineups, that's for sure. But I'm still in on Odunze for this season, though, especially with DJ Moore no longer in the mix. In that sort of scenario, I can easily see Odunze regaining his fantasy value from early last season and make good on expectations. Both Odunze and Burden should be considered popular breakouts in the Chicago passing game.
Yep.
Last but not least, Alec Pierce. Important to note, he returned to practice.
Yep.
But not only did the Colts trade Michael Pittman Jr. to the Steelers, but they also signed Alec Pierce to a massive 4-year, $114 million contract. If money truly talks, then he should easily see a career high in targets. His current best is 84, by the way. Pierce, who finished as the wide receiver 28 a season ago, is now in a position to be far more productive in a Colts offense that will lean on him as its alpha. Yes, I know Keenan Allen, old man, still wheeling it, but it's also noticeable that in Alec Pierce's final 4 games with Danny Dimes playing the majority of snaps, he scored 17 plus fantasy points 3 times with a 14.3 points per game overall. Pierce could push for weekly fantasy starter value based on that increased volume and targets. And that rounds out my sleepers at the wide receiver position. Brady, who are some of your favorites this year?
Yeah, Gbuka is gonna line out. Start off with my first breakout. Prior to his Week 6 injury, Emeka Gbuka had 3 top 8 wide receiver finishes, which showcased the upside he definitely has in this offense. Now, a year removed from those performances, he definitely didn't perform well over the second half of the year, but still, a year removed. Mike Evans is no longer there. Egbuka should see even a larger target share, and Baker Mayfield also has room for improvement last year. This Bucks offense in general has room for improvement, and I think they're going to do that under Zach Robinson. Like I mentioned when I was talking about Chris Godwin, Egbuka is being drafted around pick 40, wide receiver 18, early 4th round. I feel comfortable taking him in the 3rd round for sure. I think he has the potential to finish as a top 12 fantasy wide receiver with Mike Evans freeing up 61 targets from last year. I would draft Egbuka ahead of T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, Tedero McMillan, all who have a higher ADP. And then second breakout, Marvin Harrison Jr. seems like a clear bounce back candidate after last season's regression. I've got him as wide receiver 28. I actually think I moved him up. Now I have him wide receiver 27. Enter new head coach Mike LaFleur. He's going to feature Marvin Harrison Jr. as the X receiver. Harrison's being drafted closer to his floor rather than his ceiling after missing 5 games due to injury last year. He ranks among the top outside receivers in separation win rate. I am smashing the draft button on him as a wide receiver 3 or a wide receiver 4 because of his potential upside. This guy was touted as one of the best college prospects in NFL history. Now, does that have something to do with his dad? Maybe, but at the same time, he's super talented, and I am taking him in the early 6th round. I'd take him over both Jags receivers, Brian Thomas Jr. and Parker Washington. Something to note, end zone targets, wide receiver end zone targets per game
Per
since
game.
2017. Marvin Harrison Jr. averages 1.07 end zone targets per game. That's ahead of DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Rome Odunze, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cortland Sutton, DeAndre Hopkins, and AJ Green. Those are some throwback names there at the end. But in the two the Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jacoby Brissett, when they had limited action last year, because Harrison was battling an injury, but Brissett actually helped Marvin Harrison play well when healthy. There were 4 games where Harrison played at least 61% of the snaps with Brissett, and Harrison scored 12.9 PPR points in 3 of those games and averaged 14.4 PPR points per game over that span. He also averaged nearly 9 targets per game in those 4, 8.8 to be exact. So Marvin Harrison Jr., this is maybe the last time you can get him this cheap before next year. But remember where he was going early last year, bit a lot of people. I think it's got a lot of sour taste in people's mouths. So take a late flyer, not a mid-round flyer on Marvin Harrison Jr. My final breakout is going to be Zay Flowers. I'm hoping he can up his touchdown rate, which is only at 5.9% for his career, but he's only 25 years old. This is the prime breakout age for wide receivers. He averaged 12.9 PPR points per game last year, in his first season, 12.3 in his second, and 14.3 last season. And he has no more than 5 touchdowns in a season. Like I said, he needs to up that touchdown rate to pay off his breakout value. Yards are increasing by the season. He had his rookie year, 858 yards. Then it was 1,059. Last year, 1,211. targets are increasing, and the lack of passing volume last year, it still increased his targets. He had 118 targets, career high, 86 receptions last year, also a career high. There's really not much else there for a threat in the passing game. Mark Andrews is about it. Other than that, likely is gone to the New York Giants, and Rashad Bateman may make a little bit of an impact, but I expect Zay Flowers to take a lot of targets in this office as he did last year, leading them in targets, setting a career high in targets and receptions. So draft you some Zay Flowers. I have him wide receiver 17, but I'd feel comfortable taking him ahead of guys like T. Higgins and maybe even Lab McConkey. I'd be fine with that. But some other breakouts I like, just name them off real quick. I like that you mentioned Lab McConkey, Tanner. I think Jalen Waddle also should be mentioned. Going to be going into this Denver offense as the number one target. I think he has potential, and I think Sean Payton's going to utilize him in ways that we haven't seen the Miami Dolphins utilize him to get him out in space. He's a speedster. I think he's going to be a lot of fun in this Broncos offense. And a guy that's not going to break out, but going around this range because he's broken out before is DJ Moore. I just think he's good value in these middle rounds, early rounds when you're trying to target wide receivers in rounds 4, 5, and 6. Um, and I agree with you on the Luther Burden breakout. I'm fully bought in. Kept him with one of my keeper picks, so hopefully he can make that pay off, and we see a Luther Burden breakout because he was electric to watch in college, and he was electric to watch last year. So let's get into the bus, and then we're going to go into draft strategy. Tanner, you want to rip off some busts, and then I'll go.
Yep, let's get right into it. Look, some of these guys, while they may have the bust tag, at least in my opinion, that's not to say some of them aren't still at the edge of being there inside the top 10, the edge of they're right inside the top 20, and so on and so forth. So they're still good players, but they do, they come with some red flags. Let's start things off in New Orleans with Chris Olave. Um, he's coming off with what can be described as a magical season. He had career highs across the board en route to a wide receiver 6 finish in PPR leagues. Huh? What? Chris Olave did what? The question though, can he do it again? Well, I think it'll be tough. First off, last season Olave avoided injuries for the first time in a few years, which allowed him to start 16 games for the first time in his career. Second, the Saints added Travis Achan Jr. and, more importantly, when he returns, Jordan Tyson to the offense. That will mean a dent in the 10 targets a game Olave averaged in 2025. Olave should remain productive, but I think regression is imminent. Now, we have Garrett Wilson with the Jets. We've all been waiting for Wilson to have that true breakout season, but will we be waiting in vain? I mean, he was solid when he was active last season, but he missed 10 games due to injuries. Wilson was also seeing a massive target share, 30%, over 30% in the offense. And that is almost a lock to decrease after the Jets added rookies Kenyon Sadiq and Omar Cooper Jr. The team will also have A.D. Mitchell for a full season, and let's not forget about Mason Taylor. The Jets are not exactly set at quarterback either, as Geno Smith might be an upgrade over last season's mess, but he's certainly not great. All of this has me questioning Wilson's true ceiling. With that being said, he's still, just inside the top 20, at least for me. And that's probably around that like 18, 19 range.
I got a
for
19.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, that seems. Next we have Malik Neighbors. Unless you've been living under a rock, then
Hopefully he. Well, I just want to mention Garrett Wilson, tier 6, so he doesn't even make tier 5 for me. And then yeah, go ahead on Malik Neighbors.
Alrighty, yeah, Malik. I mean, unless you just haven't been paying attention, then you would understand that Malik comes with a big question mark. He had major knee reconstruction last year, and he required a cleanup procedure in May to relieve some stiffness. the Giants have also added a boatload of middling wide receivers, and that includes 33-year-old OBJ to add depth in case Neighbors is ready for week one or is not ready for week one. Or depth in the case that he is there for week one as well.
Hmm.
There's
It's looking
even
like he
been,
will be.
yeah, I agreed. I've been hearing that. It's been positive from New York at least. There's even been talk that he and in the past that he could have opened the season on the pup list. And it could have taken, some time for him to get back to his previous fantasy greatness. But fortunately those, to your point, those rumors have kind of died down a little bit. But still, if you're planning on drafting Neighbors, it should be with the expectation that you're not going to get high end totals. Um, with that being said, though, again, I still have this guy right around wide receiver 12, maybe 13,
I got him
14
wide receiver
range.
12. I took him
Okay.
in, just to put it in perspective, I took him at the beginning of round 3 in a
Hmm.
12-team draft. People are saying he's moving up into round 2. Um, I would not take him that early. That seems way too early for me. Round 3, I'm pretty comfortable with it. If you can get him any later than that, I think you feel fine. But like you said, Tanner, you gotta understand that there is some risk, and he
Yep.
is coming
Just
off major surgery.
temper those expectations, fantasy managers. All right, moving the list along though. We got Devonte Adams. Um, Part of his greatness last year was that he led all wide receivers in touchdown catches with 14. And because of that, he averaged a solid 16.8 points per game. Now he did miss a few games with a hamstring injury, and the Rams were actively looking to either trade him or upgrade the position. They were interested in AJ Brown, for example. That's concerning. I mean, as is the fact that Devontae is heading into his age 33 season. Look, everything went right in the Rams passing attack last year. You know, especially with Matthew Stafford, and that's likely to be the scenario again in 2026. But I'd beware of Devontae Adams. Jalen Waddle of the Broncos, stirring up the pot a little bit on this episode.
That's fine.
Look, I still have him. Let's not to say he's not. Again, right outside of wide receiver 15, wide receiver 20 range.
Yeah, somewhere in
Uh,
there.
Probably like 17. Just to middle it. But so again though, Jalen Waddle, and look, the Broncos gave up multiple draft picks,
Yeah,
including a 2026 first rounder that
and
was
they use
traded
it.
that was traded to the Jets in exchange for Jalen Waddle. Now that's definitely a win for the offense and a win for Bo Nix, but it's a bit less of a positive move for Waddle's fantasy value. I think that's due in large part to the potential target share decline from the 25.6% he saw in 2025 games in which Tyreek Hill was not playing. The Broncos wide receiver room is loaded. Cortland Sutton, Troy
Yeah.
Franklin, Pat Bryant. So Waddle's role might not be as consistent as it was last year in Miami, but I think he'll be a risky wide receiver too in drafts.
You know what's funny, Tanner? You say that. Someone on Instagram's Zaven said, my Broncos got the best wide receiver room, arguably, by the way, boys.
That is up there with this for at the top, that's for sure. I mean, Bo Nix is not short of pass catchers out there, and Sean Payton, we know he knows how to use them. Going back to Bo Nix though, quarterback seven finishes in his first 2 years. Now coming into his third season, they got a guy like Jalen Waddle. That's add him to the equation. Now we're looking at maybe Bo Nix's first top 5 finish of
Hmm.
his career. We will see. But certainly like that offense and excited to see what they put together. Moving along to Detroit, we've got Jameson Williams. If you're into volatility, right? Those 3 catches, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns type of guy. Jamison Williams is the wide receiver for you. Really good in Scott Fishbowl, by the way, Brady.
Yeah.
In 2025, he was nearly impossible to trust in fantasy lineups, scoring single digits, including 2 zeros 7 times, 2 goose eggs. He also posted a few huge games, finishing with 16 plus points 8 times. Overall, his 12.9 point per game average wasn't much better than Quentin Johnston at 12.2 points per game. Yet the differences in their early ADP data, 54 spots, is astounding. While talented and capable of putting up a big number at any moment, Williams' lack of consistency and rock bottom, again, 2 donuts, rock bottom floor makes him tough to trust. Moving along, we have Mike Evans. Minor groin. He has a minor groin strain, as the team's calling it. Preparing for week 1 or expected
That's
for week 1.
Substation.
Got questions. We have questions and we need answers, Substation. Mike Evans has been one of the best wide receivers in fantasy football over the past decade, but even the greats see their statistical success come to an end. And at age 33, like Devontae Adams, that time has come for Mike Evans. He's coming off an injury-plagued 2025 season that saw him miss 9 games, and his 10.6 points per game average was a career worst. Older wide receivers who change teams late in their careers are rarely as productive with their new squads, so it's hard to see a scenario where Evans improves over his 2025 totals. In Pittsburgh, DK Metcalf on the list. Look, he was disappointing last season. Ranking as wide receiver 23, despite being the primary passing game option for Aaron freaking Rodgers. The offense will have a much different look in 2026 with Mike McCarthy in town, but the addition of Michael Pittman Jr. and rookie Bernard should shrink Metcalf's target share. At this point, he is no more than a flex starter who could and will likely remain inconsistent. Michael Wilson in Arizona, he busted out last season. Finished as the wide receiver 10 in PPR leagues. Like, what? Michael Wilson and Chris Olave in there from that 6 to 10? So, look, why would he be considered a player to beware of, right? Well, in his, like to your point, Brady, in his splits in games with and without Marvin Harrison Jr., they're disturbing. In 10 games where Marvin Maserati played at least 20 snaps, Wilson averaged 6.2 points. Again, in games where Marvin Harrison played at least 20 snaps, Wilson averaged 6.2 points. And in the 7 games Harrison played fewer than 20 snaps or he was out, Wilson's average swelled up to 22.6 points. The 8-game stretch where he averaged 21.2 points is also very unsustainable. So I think Wilson will be hard-pressed to not experience regression this season. Last on the bus list, we have BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jags. The fantasy community is a year late on this prediction, myself included. But because, again, BTJ was going around that like 12 to 15 overall last year. But I also don't see Thomas being a major bounce back candidate. Let's be honest. Most of his fantasy success came in a different offense and with Mac Jones, not Trevor Lawrence, under center. In 8 career games played with Jones, BTJ averaged 19.3 points. In 23 games with Trevor Lawrence, that average falls to 12.2 points, including 14 games last year where he averaged 9.9 points. If you're going to target a Jacksonville wide receiver, it should be Parker Washington and not BTJ. And that rounds out the end of my bus at the wide receiver position this season. Brady, who are some names you have on the list?
Before I get into the bus, let's just go into my potential QB1. We have breaking news out of LA, Rams versus Chargers, and we got an absolute rocket from my guy Justin Herbert right here. Take a look.
A lot of time for Herbert to unload a deep ball down the middle of the field.
On a rope.
There's
On a rope to who? Just as we were saying.
Watch out for my boy Justin Herbert this year. With that being said, we're gonna go into my bust.
Brady, on that
Tedero
topic,
McMillan.
of Justin
Okay.
Herbert and the Chargers offense, are you a little bit concerned about the interior of their offensive line? They just had an injury to a center.
Yep.
If they lose one of those tackles,
Yeah.
things could really start to collapse. But even with those tackles, the numbers and the statistics and the deep dives into everything about the interior of that offensive line is dead last. And we know how much Herbert was sacked last year,
Oh
especially in the
yeah.
playoffs. Do any of those things at all concern you, or have you thought about any of that?
Yep. I think I mention it in almost every time I write about a Charger. Try
Mm-hmm.
to. I think I mentioned it when I talked about Omarion Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
It's just worrisome. Tyler Biotish is the center that went down. They're gonna have to sign someone. I don't know who, but they're gonna have to sign someone. It is concerning, but I think if the tackles are healthy, I feel very confident. Now, a couple of tackles go down, and it's last year all over again. But hopefully they can figure out something. They do have good tight ends that can stay in and block. Rondé Gadsden, David Njoku, but yeah, and also they added Alec Ingold, fullback out of Miami. So Mike McDaniel's very familiar with him. Can add some added protection in certain packages. But yeah, it's something to worry about for sure. But I'm all in on Justin Herbert, so let's see it happen. I mean, that clip right there shows you what he's capable of, and with a weapon like Quentin Johnston deep, it's what he
Watch
can
out.
do. 65-yard bomb. But yeah, starting off with my bus, it's going to be a guy that you disagree with. It's Tataroa McMillan. The Carolina Panthers last year were very limited on their pass rate, 27th in the NFL last year. And Bryce Young does not pass for many yards. He did not reach 200 passing yards in 12 of 17 games. When Jalen Coker came back in week 8, he took a lot of looks from Tet, not early on, but throughout as the season progressed, he started taking a lot more looks. His ADP right now is wide receiver. Let me double check this. I think it's wide receiver 16. Um, yep, wide receiver 16, 39th overall. I just can't buy into that. A couple guys going behind him that I'd take over him. T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, Emeka Egbuka, Lad McConkey, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, and then I don't think I would take Devontae over him. Yeah, I would definitely take Devontae over him, but or not take Devontae over him. Devontae's 25th, Tedero is 24th. So a guy I just can't buy into mainly because of the offense. Now he could prove me wrong if they come out pass heavy, but I just don't see them doing that with their running backs. Now I think Jonathan Brooks is due for a good year as long as he's healthy. Chuba Hubbard also should be good for a pretty good year. But I mean, I just don't trust Bryce Young in this passing attack, which is not anything against Tedder or McMillan himself. It's just the offense I can't buy into right now. And I think he's going way too high, and I just rather get guys later. DK Metcalf is another bust of mine. I agree with you, Tanner. I like Pittman better. Pittman's going later in drafts, and I think he's going to be a more reliable target for Aaron Rodgers, honestly. And this offense won't be crazy pass happy offense. But DK Metcalf's going wide receiver 34, 81st overall. A couple guys behind him. Michael Pittman Jr., 94th overall. Take him. Alec Pierce dropped down because of his injury. Well, he's off the injury list, off the pup list. He's back. So I'd take him. I'd take Chris Godwin, who we both liked as a sleeper, Tanner, over DK Metcalf. I'd also take Stephon Diggs over DK Metcalf. We just saw what Quentin Johnston's capable of. Would you take him over DK Metcalf? Probably not. But definitely would rather pass on DK and get someone else in this range and go for a guy like Quentin Johnston with a lot of upside, Jordan Addison a lot of upside. But I would definitely wait on some other sleepers. Casey Concepcion, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson is going actually ahead of DK, but Jaden Reed's another guy in that Green Bay offense that could see an uptick in targets. And another bust. I just can't get around to selecting this guy in really any drafts, and I think it's more so due to my concerns from last year, which I should not be doing that, but it is Garrett Wilson. I don't know how he's going to look this year. I don't know if that offense is really going to be anything. Sure, he's going to get absolutely fed with targets, but I just can't buy into Garrett Wilson, especially when guys like Emeka Egbuka, Lab McConkey, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Romo Dunze, Christian Watson, Terry McLaurin are all going after him. So I would pass on Garrett Wilson in that slot. And let's get into some draft strategy. Tanner, do you want to break this down
Yeah.
pick by pick, or do you want to just kind of break it down how you break it down how you think, and then how you think, and then I'll go into like some pick by pick situations.
Yep, sounds good. Just kind of breaking it down by the position. I mean,
Yep.
no matter what we call it, we all love bargains. This applies to the world of fantasy football as well.
Oh, yeah.
The ability to seek out and hit on players who will ultimately produce above their ADP can be the difference between a good fantasy team and a great one. Case in point, right? Chris Olave was the wide receiver 41 with an ADP of nearly 80 a year ago. He went on to become one of the 10 best wide receivers in fantasy football. Olave wasn't the only wideout bargain, as Wan'Dale Robinson, Michael Wilson, and Quentin Johnston all posted good to great fantasy point totals despite not being highly picked in drafts. So with that, which wideouts deserve the fantasy bargain label in 2026? I'll give you guys a couple. So these are mostly just ADP draft bargains. Quentin Johnston, just spoke of him, wide receiver 39 with an ADP of around 89. Look, he finished as the wide receiver 34 last season, but he was the wide receiver 22 based on a points per game average among receivers who played at least 10 games. Again, new offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel compared Johnston's physical traits to the likes of Julio Jones and Andre Johnson. And the fact that Johnston is the wide receiver 39 based on ADP data makes him a serious, serious bargain. He's somebody I'm targeting as a number 4 fantasy receiver in like all of my drafts. And you guys should do the same. Chris Godwin Jr., I know we both spoke on him, but I mean, most of the fantasy football attention among Tampa goes to Egbuka, but we shouldn't forget about Godwin, former
Can I
fantasy. Yep.
chime in real quick? I don't know how this is possible, but on ESPN, Chris Godwin is going
outside
his
the top
wide receiver
36.
52.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere else, he's top 40.
I've got data that he's going outside of the top 36 wide receivers based on ADP.
Yep. So he's 39th right now.
Right now, I'd say overall is 40, wide receiver 40 with an ADP of 90.
It's crazy.
So again, a former fantasy superstar, but he's also going to benefit from Mike Evans leaving. We just discussed his ADP, so there's some real bargain appeal in drafts with him. Don't be surprised if he ends up one of the Buccaneers' 2 most targeted wide receivers. Josh Downs with the Colts, now wide receiver 43 ADP with an overall ADP of around 98. The trade that sent Michael Pittman Jr. to the Steelers opened the door for Josh Downs to have a career season. He's a talented slot wide receiver. He's shown flashes of fantasy upside. He averaged a respectable 13.1 points per game in his second NFL year, before he posted just 8.5 per game last year. Projected number 2 wideout in the offense behind Alec Pierce. Maybe Keenan sneaks in there. But I can see Downs becoming a weekly flex starter, or at least a matchup-based flex play this season. Jaden Reed, another great
Mhm.
draft bargain at the position. Wide receiver 44 with an ADP of 101. Took a step back in production wise last season. He played only 7 games and averaged a mere 6.9 points per game. But the good news is that we've seen him produce at a high level in the past, like 2023, for example. And the Packers' wide receiver room is much more manageable without Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks. Still, I think fantasy managers aren't giving Reed much in the way of respect based on ADP. You can get him as a number 5 wide receiver in a lot of drafts. Count me
Mhm.
in at that cost for sure. And then last, I've got KC Concepcion. Just it's already been mentioned. He's drawn comparison to Zay Flowers, but his ADP right now is around 124 overall, coming in at wide receiver 51. And then a couple of the players that I like to target, Egbuka. Again, Mike Evans is a San Fran. I can easily see him being the top option for the passing game. He's one of my favorite breakout candidates. And the same can be said about Luther Burden.
Yep.
He's going to see a huge increase in targets with DJ Moore now in Buffalo. Um, again, he's getting praised all off season from head coach Ben Johnson. Quentin Johnston, again, um, criminally underrated, undervalued with an ADP in the low 90s. I think that's a real steal for a player who was a top 25 wide receiver based on points per game average last year. And then just to summarize the last two I already mentioned, Concepcion. I can see the first round rookie being in the top 2 in targets for the Browns, and he's coming at a cost of wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5. Same holds true for Jaden Reed, as I just mentioned. Wasn't too long ago he was a weekly starter in fantasy. Could happen again this year with Dobbs and Wicks gone. He's still on the board in the late 100s. He could be an absolute bargain. And yeah, that wraps out my ADP draft bargains at the position. A lot of late round guys floating around that 89 to sort of 109 range, if you will. Concepcion even as late as 124 overall. So in that range, like I like some of those guys, and then obviously Burden and Egbuka. But Brady, what about you? What's some draft strategy you have for the listeners?
Yeah, I'm gonna go over like the first couple rounds, but before I get into that, I'm gonna throw out some like super dart throws if you're in deep leagues, late round wide receivers. Caleb Douglas, Texas Tech alumni, now Miami Dolphin, like what he's doing. Another Miami Dolphin rookie, Chris Bell, wide receiver. Another one. I love Trey Tucker, I mentioned earlier. I think Kyle Williams is an interesting one on the New England Patriots. And then Dontavian Wicks could be value late in that Philly offense. I don't know how much value he's going to provide. Probably the wide receiver 3 option on that team. Even further behind, target option, Dallas Goddard. Dallas Goddard, a guy I like for the Chiefs, Cyrus Allen, rookie. I think he can do well. And then I would take a dart throw on Tank Dell after Jaden Higgins' injury. I think he's worth a shot. Jalen Coker, of course, as well. Some draft strategy, though, to go over. If you're in the draft slot 1 or 2, you're taking a running back first round, and I would say get 1 to 2 wide receivers at the turn after you select Jameer Gibbs or Bijan as your first pick. This really depends on if you're in a PPR league, half PPR standard league. I definitely aim to get at least 2 wide receivers at the turn, maybe one in like Bowers if you really want to in a 12-team league. But I still think you got to get a solid wide receiver in round 2 or round 3 if you have a draft slot 1 or 2. Draft slot 3 and 4, this is Puka and Jamar Chase. So the top 4 is pretty straightforward. So you're taking a wide receiver in round 1. Hopefully a running back makes it back to you in round 2. If not, then I'm going the best wide receiver available and grabbing a running back in round 3. But if you go wide receiver, running back, then wide receiver, you could end up with Chris Olave, Malik Neighbors, Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers. in that range, which I think Olave could be great value in round 3 if you get him and you have the third or fourth pick. But it may be a guy I want to sell high on halfway through the year if he starts out on a hot streak because Jordan Tyson's coming back in a couple months. But I still think he can start the year strong. If you have picks 5, 6, 7, or 8, really, I would target Amon Ra first, and then Christian McCaffrey, then JSN, and then go possibly running back near here. But depending whether you go running back or wide receiver in round 1, I would automatically do the opposite in round 2, or have at least 2 running backs through the first 2 rounds and go wide receiver in round 3. There's great wide receiver value in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7. I mean, shoot, you can get guys in rounds 3 and 4 like a Zay Flowers. Let's see here, a Lad McConkey. If Emeka Egbuka's there, you can get him. Malik Neighbors, Devontae Smith. I mean, there's guys with some upside. And then if you want to wait till round 4, I mean, DJ Moore is going around rounds 4 or 5. Luther Burden's in that range. Tedero McMillan will be in there, even though I'm not drafting him that early. I'd probably wait till rounds 5, but he seemingly always goes before I want to take him. And then round 6, Marvin Harrison Jr. So there, Parker Washington, round 6 as well, but we'll see. And then draft slots 9, 10, 11, or 12. I would definitely look to go running back at the turn of the rounds 1 and 2 if you have a late pick, and gets 2 stud running backs and like I said, lots of value in wide receiver in rounds 3 through 6. Definitely would take flyers on Marvin Harrison Jr., DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle in the middle rounds, Zay Flowers, Emeka Egbuka for their breakout seasons. And then McConkey, great value in round 4. I don't know how I got him in round 5 in a 12-teamer, but I did. Absolute steal. So yeah, I think those middle rounds, and then throw those darts on those late round wide receivers, like we mentioned. If you have an IR spot, I'd honestly throw a dart on Jordan Tyson, stash him on your IR and let it ride. And when he comes back, he could be of value to you as a top wide receiver in that offense. So that's something to look out for. Another guy that's going a little later that you could target is, I'm gonna throw out one more. Let's throw out, this one's gonna be super deep, honestly. I would say no, there's no way. I'd say Jeremy Bernard of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep, the rookie. Yep.
He scored tonight, actually, on a
Mhm.
one-on-one, shook a defender on like a screen pass and got into the end zone. That's a guy I think that Aaron Rodgers would like to throw to. He's shifty, he plays well in the slot. Out of Alabama, we've seen Alabama produce some high-end wide receivers. Now, I don't think he'll get as consistent, but, I mean, shoot, he's going as wide receiver 91 right now, so just take a late round flyer in a deep league and see what happens if it comes down to it. But other than that, I think that's pretty much my draft strategy. Go target wide receivers in the middle rounds. If you got to go wide receiver early, by all means do it. I like CeeDee Lamb at the turn, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm a little lower on JSN. Just a little nervous about that offense and what it could look like, but we've seen JSN produce, so he's an elite talent. But yeah, anything else, Tanner, for the listeners before we go?
Nope. Sign up for the newsletter, get weekly emails, updates on rankings, adjustments, injuries, all that good stuff. And then, of course, check out Fantasy Pros for the latest articles, constantly being asked questions, responding, great free information. And then don't forget to send in your questions, whether it be during the live or over on X or Twitter. Really, any social media, guys, hit us up. We're here to help.
Yep, always here to help. Definitely shoot them over on whatever social media platform. And stay tuned for Monday. We've got Jim Coventry. He's coming on and going to talk with him about some of his guys he likes, guys he does not like, and get into some ADP values he may have for you later in drafts. And good luck if you're drafting this weekend. We will be back next week with a tight end, defense, kicker episode, going to some bold predictions as well in that episode. So it's going to be a great episode before the fantasy season officially kicks off about 2 weeks from now. Less than 2 weeks from now is the first game on a Wednesday night. Keep that in mind, everyone. Well, sweet. Thanks everyone for listening to the BA Sports Podcast. Like Tanner said, give Fantasy Pros a shout. Rankings will be on there and updated. They're also on BA Sports Podcast mailer page website. So look for that and use our tools as you can while drafting. They're all up on the website. You can use Fantasy Pros tools. And we'll catch you next time on the BA Sports Podcast for the tight end episode. So let's get after it, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one. Got me feeling nicey.